It's about time because we're going there.
Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of We're Going There. I am your host, Bianca Juarez, and this is a podcast where we are going to have a real talk conversation. And yes, for those that are watching on YouTube, it's going to be a little bit different because I'm not in a studio. I don't have makeup on. I just actually had a procedure to my eyes, so I have to be indoors. I'm not really driving and I have no makeup on. The irony is that today's episode should have already been recorded the last day that I recorded podcasts. Why? Because July is my Sabbath. That means I take a month off to focus on what God is doing in my life, to focus on wholeness, to focus on where do I believe that God is leading me? Where do I believe that God is leading his people? And I want to make sure that you guys get to come along on this journey. Except I didn't picture it to happen like this. In my living room. And why am I sitting on the floor of my living room? Well, I have one carpet in my entire house and it's in my living room. I'm not a carpet fan. Everything's hardwood floors except for audio purposes. I was like, well, if I'm not in the studio, I still want the audio to be good. So I'm sitting on the floor to hopefully absorb some sound waves. Look at me being all high tech. Yes. Around these here parts, We're Going There. Nothing says classy and fancy like being in my living room. So welcome to my living room. Welcome to a bare face. I did put on lip gloss because I could hear the words of my grandmother in my head telling me I look dead without lip gloss. So go put on a lip. So I had to put on a lip for the fam. But I want to just spend a couple minutes because Sabbath has been a critical and important part in my life. And, sometimes I pop on the podcast and it's like this safe place where I'm like processing life and things that I have maybe have a handle on or feel like I can give some practical tips on how to do something well. The truth is, for this particular podcast, this has already been on the docket of what we were going to talk about because Sabbath has become a very important part of my life over the last, 2 years. 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, 1 week a year. And I live by that, and I'll unpack a little bit more of that in today's episode. But I am actually starting this podcast with an admission. I was kind of wrestling through knowing that I was going to talk to you, that this was going to be recorded in my house, circumstances. Y'all don't need the details, but the original audio didn't work out. And so here we are. And as I was preparing for Sabbath, technically today was the first day, except I said that Sabbath began in July and today is June 31st and I'm scrambling to get everything done. So the sun has set, the dog is sitting next to me, he is fed, and I really wrestled because I realized that today, which is supposed to be my official first day off on Sabbath, I still find myself working. And yesterday I did not go to church. Thankfully, my dad covered at church and he preached his heart out. I'm super grateful for that. But I was watching online and then I was home and I realized after my eye procedure, I wasn't really going to do a whole lot, but I realized, how do I say this? I felt like useless. And by feeling useless, I felt pointless. And then by feeling pointless, I felt insignificant. Now, I have been forthcoming and I've been very honest that some people have like addictions to alcohol or addictions to, there's Richie. Yeah, we're really classy around these ear parts. Sorry if you saw his bum. Some people have addictions to different things. I have been open to admit that work has been an unhealthy coping mechanism. I discovered early on as a kid that if I worked hard enough, then I could be of value. If I worked hard enough, then I will be the one to finish, to cross the finish line. If I work, then I will get an A. So much of my identity has been wrapped up in my efficiency, has been wrapped up in my completion. And I'm going on Sabbath and yes, I'm very excited. And I've been excited about this for 2 months and all of a sudden it's here and I'm like panicked. And then there was a part of me that's just like, do I record this podcast that's talking about Sabbath when I'm not Sabbathing on my Sabbath day? And then I realized, friends, we're just going to be honest and we're going to be real. A story I've shared before, but I don't think I've shared it on the podcast. I was asked to speak in France to a women's gathering. And I had a couple days in between one event in the UK and then one event in France. I have loved ministering in Europe for years. I'm actually going back to London next week to speak at a women's conference for a church that I love out there. Shout out to Jubilee Church in Enfield. But I love ministering. I love seeing what God is doing in Europe. And I had a couple days that I was able to relax. And I went on a tour of a particular city, and you're taking a look. It's a countryside of France, and you're taking a look at just rows and rows and rows of fields of grapevines. And the vines are arranged in the most picturesque, beautiful way. It's on slopes and hills, and the sun is coming up and the birds are chirping and the sky is blue, and it's absolutely beautiful. And then what looks so odd is that there's this large square, which is referred to a hectare. American measurement is a little bit different, but think of it kind of like an acre, if you will, amidst these beautiful manicured vines of nothingness. It was just a large square of nothingness. And when I say nothingness, there was like nothing there except for some weeds. The ground was fallow. There was no plants. There was no bushes. There was some weeds. And then there was this random cow. There was a dog. There was a bleating goat, and that's bleating, like goat, and a dog basking in the sun. It was so odd to me. I thought it was so weird. And I turned to my tour guide and I was like, why is there an empty plot of ground with unattended grass and weeds and animals? And she looked at me in her French farming clothes, and with her thick French accent, she says, "Oh la la, this is l'important detail of how we do farming." Yes, I will give you a French accent because that's how she sounded in my head. And she said, every 7 years, the ground must rest. The vines are removed. The ground is left alone for 7 years. The nutrients have been putting into the vines, and le wine, and everything is le in French in my mind. And then she said, after 7 years, the ground must rest. Listen, what she told me was in English with a French accent. And so I heard it, but my soul heard something very, very different. See, in our society, let me just make this personal, because maybe you have got your life together and you are Sabbathing and you're resting and you have found the perfect Zen balance between, harmony and your calendar. Amazing. But for the most of us, we give and we give and we give and we give. And if we're constantly giving, we have to take a moment to rest and replenish. If we are that hectare of dirt in the ground in France, we have been pouring nutrients after nutrients year after year into the vines until finally, if we are not careful, the nutrients will leave the ground and we will not be able to produce the fruit that we once had. So, my friends, tuning into the podcast on this Sabbath month, tomorrow I will be Sabbathing, but today I'm just going to bring a very simple word. And it is not a word coming from a place of I have accomplished this and let me be your coach. It is an admission of I am with you and I'm doing this with you. And if it is hard, I get it. Because so much of our identity is wrapped up in what we do and what we accomplish and what we achieve. And so if you're here today and you're tired, if you are listening to this podcast and you feel like your soul is weary, if you are watching on YouTube or listening in your car and you feel like nobody sees you or nobody cares, I'm inviting your soul to a place of rest. Why are we talking about this on this Sabbath episode? It's because our identity is being hijacked by our efficiency. We are losing ourselves on the altar of work and hustle and grind, and we are doing more and we want to achieve more and amass more and accomplish more. And we are what we have. This is the messaging that we are living. We are what we have. Worse, we are what we do. And so before we discuss, of course, some biblical impact, because if you're new to this podcast, let me just share this truth with you. I will always give a little Bible. I am a pastor, not just by calling and trade, but I'm not just a pastor by trade. I'm a pastor by calling. And so I firmly believe the Bible will give us life practical principles on how we could live and love and work in life. But let's just give a little bit of science and data because I love a little data. We have worked more. This generation, my generation and the upcoming generation is working more than at any other point in human history. And what has been happening slowly but surely is that we have taken an 8-hour workday. And because we've been so efficient, we are stretching it into 10-hour workdays. And if you work from home or you have a flexible work schedule, science is now showing that you're working up to 12 hours a day regularly. And what science denotes is that if you work a 10-hour workday more than 4 days a week, your body will not just be physically tired. You are 200% more at risk for irritability, agitation, and exhaustion. And if that doesn't kind of like arrest your soul, if you are working more than 50 hours a week, multiple weeks in a row, you are 400 times more at risk for anxiety, depression, and exhaustion. And the irony, here's the hard part. When I read this statistic, I was like shook. The more that we are working, the longer hours that we're putting in, it actually drops our efficiency. And if you don't think this pertains to you, let me just speak to the largest audience of the podcast. Yes, we have people tune in from around the world, and I'm shout out to the places that listen. But the bulk of our listenership comes from America. And if you are from America, we work 442 more hours than our French friends. We work 301 more hours than our Japanese friends. We work 294 hours more than our friends in the UK. We, as Americans, we have the least amount of holidays and the most amount of work days for children. So Americans are overworked, overstimulated, overmedicated. Today, yes, I'm going to be talking about Sabbath, but really, I'm going to be talking about our identity. And I say this again, I have to humbly admit to you, I've realized, especially in this season of church planting and launching a church and finding a building and restoring and replenishing the soil of my life and what God has called me to after a crazy, crazy season of loss. I have to give myself margin to rest and remind myself, I am not my job. I am not what I accomplish, and I am not what I have. I am enough. Because God sees me, God loves me, God has forgiven me, God has chosen me, God has given me his spirit. I am enough. And how I remind myself of this isn't because I'm quoting scripture. How I'm reminding myself of this is I lay down the thing that I want to hold on to. And that is my identity. That is work. 100%. So, Genesis chapter 2. Listen, I'm going to give you a little Bible. Just get over it. Okay. You're going to love it. I'm going to catch you up on your Bible reading plan. It's fine. Okay. So in Genesis chapter 1, there is the creation account. God works for 6 days and he says it is good. And he's creating various aspects of the world and it's good. The sun, the moon, the stars, the sea, the land, and every single day he said that it was good. And on the 6th day, he breathed into Adam and he said that it was good. And we pick this up in Genesis 2:1. Thus, the heavens and the earth were completed in their vast array. Verse 2 says, by the 7th day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy because on it, he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. So I don't want this to get lost on us. Yes, I read those 2 verses. But let me just make this very plain. Let me put the cookies on the lower shelf. God of the universe, Elohim Adonai, a little Hebrew for my friends. Yes, God of the universe worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And then what did he do? He rested. So if God of the universe poured out and then rested, what makes us think, his children of the Most High God, what makes us think that we are unworthy of rest or exempted from resting? And yes, if you don't know, resting is a command. So, in Israel, I love Israel. I have been now 8 times. If you're familiar, when I teach the Bible, I have an inordinate love of Hebrew history and my Jewish counterparts. I prayed as a child that the Lord would make me Jewish. And I found out that I am 0.5%. So I am Jewish, just a little bit of Jew. And let me give you a little bit of Hebrew. And Shabbat which is the Hebrew word for Sabbath, is a command that was given to us by God. And if we love rest, the idea of vacation makes us excited, or crawling into a comfy bed with clean sheets makes us excited. Like, if we are excited by the concept of rest or relaxation or vacation, why don't we do it? The 10 Commandments, out of the book of Exodus, we read through the 10 Commandments, and it's thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal. We read these commandments and we're like, oh yeah, that's super severe. That's super severe. Yeah, absolutely. And we obey those commandments. But do you know that one of the 10 Commandments is to keep the Sabbath? And yet we miss it all the time. And basic morality is a command, like do not murder. But maturity and human flourishing is an invitation. That's the difference. Like, we're commanded, do not murder, do not steal. But resting is an invitation. And I want to be very clear. Sabbath is not a salvation issue. It's a blessing issue. And as a child of God, we need to know that we have an inheritance. And that inheritance includes blessings when we follow his commands. So why would I obey 9 of the 10 commandments? I want to obey all of them. And this concept of cycles and rhythms and breaks and rest, it has been hijacked by the West. We get it really wrong, specifically in America. And why is this? Well, for millennia, centuries, and decades, we were an agrarian society, and we operated in seasons. We planted in spring. We tended to the fields in summer. We harvested in fall, and then the ground rested in winter. Think of that field that I told you about in France. It was a resting season for that field. If there is no fruit on the vine or vegetables in the garden, well, we would wait until the fruit came. We can say that about harvesting. We can say that about gardening. Like, we just wait for the fruit to come. But when it comes to trusting God for the outcome in our life, we don't have that same mindset. Now, we shifted in the 18th century. Just stay with me. I know this sounds boring. Don't turn off. Listen, it has to make sense for us to apply it to our life. So if that was how we were raised in agrarian society and we understood seasons and rhythms and flow, when did this change? In the 18th century. Because in the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution took over, and fields were no longer the production force. No. Pretty soon, buildings were constructed, machines were built, and no longer were we dependent on seasons. We were able to produce anytime, anywhere, all the time. We didn't need seasons for production. We just worked. We didn't need sun for work. We had electricity. We didn't stop working because of the snow, because we had buildings. Do you see the pattern here? Yes. So this shifted from seasons and pausing and resting to working all the time. More work, more production, more profit, more power. There is no point in the pause, because there's no power in the pause. And because of that, and we're driven by power, we're driven by finance, we're driven by resource, we kept working. So 100 years after the Industrial Revolution, we are living in the wake of believing that our accomplishment and our accumulation is the goal of our lives. Listen, I am not against the Industrial Revolution. I'm grateful for how we have advanced. I'm grateful for how we've developed as society. I'm grateful for electricity. That's how I'm recording this podcast. But there is a cost. There's a cost to this. And our identity has shifted from who we are to what we have and what we've accomplished. In short, our identity is what you have done or what you are doing. And because of social media and digital marketing, we are now we're shown up to 4,000 ads a day. And all of this, Bianca, how does this make sense? Wait, let me connect the dots. I know I feel like that crazy person that has like a whiteboard in the back and all these notes and red lines that are connecting everything. Like, I'm crazy. I'm gonna make the point. Marketing and ads and commercials are stoking the belief that we are not enough unless we buy this or drink this or eat this or do this or wear this or go here or come there. And social media is adding to the barrage of looking at other people's lives of comparison. And advertising is literally just an attempt to make you feel like you are not enough. You don't have enough. You will not be enough unless you buy and wear and go and do all these things. And our economy is literally built on spending money on things that you and I don't need. Marketers have spent billions of dollars pandering to the idea that we are not enough. So we work and we work and we work, and then we buy and we buy and we buy so we can be and be and be. We are an achievement society. And so our value, our worth, our significance, our influence is based on what is amassed and what is achieved. So we learn more and we do more and we spend more. And yet, with all of that, we ache for more. And as a result, we are left feeling frazzled and tired and exhausted, and we are unhappy and we are unsatisfied and we are unsatiated. Dr. A.J. Swabda, he wrote a book called Subversive Sabbath. I'll include the link in the show notes to Amazon where you could purchase. But he said this: we have become perhaps the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, spiritually malnourished people in history. Why are we so exhausted? Because we're trying to keep up with the Kardashians. Can we talk about Kris Jenner's face? Oh, who said that? Who said that? Yeah. Social media makes us envious of things that we want and do not have. And we fear that we will not look enough or be enough. And the cloak of comparison weighs really heavy. And maybe this is not for you, and bless you. But I think for a lot of us, we can hold the weight of wanting to earn our value or perform for approval. And this is the good news that I have been just walking in the last 5 years. Yes, I've been a Jesus follower for a long time, but I think that losing a lot and having my life implode and walking on what felt like shards of glass for a number of years is, as a child of God, I have a loving Father who has provided for me. Yeah, not just in salvation and forgiveness of sins, but he has provided a sense of being that no thing can give. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and I will give you rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." If we are not going to God to find our rest, are we even following him? If we are producing and manufacturing and working for identity, what are we losing out on? What's the cost of that? We are losing knowing who we really are and what we've been called to do. I can't drive home this point enough, because the idea of Sabbath for me isn't just because I'm trying to observe what the Bible says and be obedient. It's really this reminder for me that I don't have to produce, I don't have to be, I don't have to perform, I don't have to talk to have value. I am enough. And this cultural moment matters. Marketing and influence and power determine whether we have enough. And if that isn't enough, my cultural story, if that isn't enough proof, then my cultural story definitely matters. I am a daughter of an immigrant. I am a first-generation American. I am the first in my family. My twin sister and I are the first in our family to graduate college. I am the first to graduate graduate school in my family. I saw how people treated my accent-speaking father. I saw how opportunities weren't given to my parents because of maybe the color of their skin, but definitely the lack of education. I saw who got ahead. I saw how they got ahead. So I did everything to war against that. I went not just to undergrad, I went to graduate school and graduated with a 4.0. I interned, I side hustled, I grinded, I worked consistently and consecutively. I worked tirelessly. I worked and worked and worked. And my work ethic was affirmed by my bosses, by my professors, by my mentors, by my family members, because it produced something. And if I kept working, I kept producing. And I realized I'm not a field. I've become a factory where it's open all the time. The lights are always on and production needs are demanding. But as a human, I am not a factory. I'm a field. I want to produce fruit in the right season. And I look back at that season of my life in my 20s. I was about 25 years old. My value was in my education. My value was in my car. I had this 2-seater BMW Z Roadster. The clothes that I bought were brand names and labels, places that I vacationed. And I mean, my value was based on what I achieved and what I amassed. But what I wasn't really taking into consideration is I got into horrible amounts of debt. I dated the absolute wrong people. At best, I didn't like who I was. At worst, I didn't know who I was. And perhaps our stories are different, maybe you wanted to keep up with a friend or a sibling. And so you bought items so your identity would be found in what you wore, but you amassed debt. Maybe you didn't feel smart enough or, never felt like you could go to school. So you amassed more degrees and kept your ever evolving need for education so that you wouldn't wear the identity of dumb. Maybe you want the status of owning a home. And so you get into a 30-year lease with horrible interest rates. And now you are at the risk of going bankrupt and you're terrified that your identity is going to be bankrupt instead of homeowner. Maybe you're terrified of being alone. And so you married a person, not because you love them or they added value to your life or you added value to their life, but because you were afraid of being desperate alone. And now you're on the verge where your identity might be divorced. What if I told you that your identity could be enough? What if you didn't have to amass or acquire? Maybe you didn't have to get or grind. What if I told you that you could be a field and not a factory? What if I told you that you could rest because God has gone before you and God says that you're enough? What if I told you that you could find peace in who you are because Jehovah Jireh is the God who is more than enough? In Matthew 11, which I just read over you, Jesus promises to give us rest for our weary souls. And the verses that follow immediately after that promise, there are 2 stories about Sabbath. So rest for our souls and Sabbath go together. So the word Sabbath means to stop. Stop working, stop wanting, stop worrying. That's the easiest way to explain it. Stop worrying, stop working, stop wanting. When I was in Israel, I got a chance to sit down with a Messianic rabbi, Pastor Samuel Smajda, and shout out Shmuli. I began to ask questions, and I never understood this concept of Shabbat. I never understood the concept of Sabbath because I was raised in a Christian home and I went to a Christian church, but I had never heard a message about Sabbath. It wasn't until, I want to say roughly around the age of 30 that I started hearing people talk about Sabbath. But the way that it was always spoken to me, it was very legalistic, very legalistic. And I remember having a conversation with him and how this was in his top 10 things of Christian living and following Jesus that he applied to his life. He's right up there with thou shalt not murder and thou shalt not steal. And this is where he was the one that gave me this idea of we observe 9 commandments and not 10. And in Exodus, it says, remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no work. And then Verse 11 says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that was in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Pastor Samuel raised his hands to calm me down because I was so turned up about this concept. I'm why are we not talking about this? This is critically important to our Christian life as a follower of Jesus. And he says we have to be very careful that the law doesn't become bondage. The Old Testament was so severe and so serious about these commandments that if you were caught picking up sticks on the Sabbath, you could be stoned. And he says Pastor Samuel, Rabbi Shmuli, said that Messiah is for the Sabbath. Jesus is our Sabbath. It's not rest. Rest doesn't mean that we don't do things. It's that we get to rest in Messiah. We get to rest in Jesus. Why? Because he's done it all. And I love I don't read out of the Message version often, but I just want to go back and read Matthew 11, but the Message version, because Eugene Peterson puts this in a version that makes it so simple and so inviting that when I go into my Sabbath, this is what I read. It's out of the Message version, Matthew 11, starting verse 28. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I love that. Freely and lightly. And that is how Sabbath should feel. A factory has to produce. A field just has to be tended to. And maybe that is why Jesus referred to himself in John 14 as the gardener. That Jehovah Jireh is enough and that he's inviting his children to bear that same identity. You don't have to do more. That our identity is secure in him. That rest is proving, Sabbath is proving to others and ourselves that we believe God will take care of us. For me, it's hard not to work on the Sabbath. It's hard for me to not send emails or take a phone call or something like that. But when we don't rest, it means that we think that we're a better provider than God. So Sabbath for me is a reminder, Bianca, sit down. You're not more in control than God. Your value isn't better if the more that you produce. I wonder what it would look like if you just sit down with me and just be. Don't produce, just be. I love just one last verse and then we'll wrap this up. But in Genesis 1, God institutes the Sabbath, which is a day of no work. Side note, I think this is important to know because this is when I talk about Sabbath, this is what I always tell people. Rabbi Shmuley said, when we talk about Sabbath, it's really important to identify that what is Sabbath. And he said the best definition, the easiest definition, and you can ask so many other rabbis and they're going to tell you so many definitions of Sabbath, but really what Sabbath is that you just have to accomplish two things on Sabbath. How do you know if you're Sabbathing? Well, you love God and you love your life. If you could finish your Sabbath by saying, I loved God and I love my life, guess what? You Sabbath well. And in Genesis chapter 1, this is the institution of the Sabbath, the day of no work. But in Exodus, the children of God were slaves under the Egyptian Pharaoh and they worked every day. They were machines. They were factories for Pharaoh. And their value was measured in productivity, literally bricks, and more bricks. So when Moses requests time off for his people to go to a festival to what? To rest, Pharaoh is angry. And it says this in Exodus 5:4, but the king of Egypt said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking these people away from their labor? Get back to work. See, Pharaoh not only rejected the idea of giving the Israelites time off, these 3 days off, we see the request itself was like wasting time from working. The slaves of Egypt had been machines for Pharaoh and their value was measured on their productivity and output. Hello, does that not sound like us living in 2025? And then Exodus 5:17 says this, Pharaoh said, lazy. That's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Verse 18, now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks. Pharaoh is absolutely cruel. He believed the problem with Israel was their laziness, that more work and harder work would be the cure for their laziness. Pharaoh hated Israel and wanted to put them in perpetual bondage. Work more, less resources. Please hear me ever so clearly. If that doesn't sound like a message for our time, I don't know what does. We are slaves to our job. We are chained to our laptops. What Pharaoh told Moses sounds like the message that we are telling ourselves or others are telling us. More work, have fewer resources. Slavery is the merciless, inhuman overload on the body. We are not machines. We are mankind. We are children of the Most High God, and we are acting like slaves under the restlessness of rush and hurry and desire and inadequacy. So God frees them and he reminds them of who they are and more importantly, who they can trust. And we see this in Exodus 16. We are told that God provides manna for them in the desert. And every day they would go out and collect just enough. They couldn't keep any extra. It would just come to them. And on the sixth day, they could collect twice as much because on the seventh day, they rested. I am so in love with the, what's that word? The providing nature of God. Providential? That's providential, right? Yes. I don't know. I'm talking to you like you're going to talk back to me. That's the providential nature. Is it providential? Providential? Provide. Yeah. Yeah. It's the providential nature of a good heavenly Father. You can enter into his rest because he is enough. And the story out of Exodus and the fight against slavery is to remind us today that we are not machines. The provision is more than just the output of human hands. It's the provision of a good God. And we are freed, like the Israelites, to gather for 6 days. And on the seventh day, we rest. My heart and my hope is that this isn't like the full explanation or argument for Sabbath. My heart and my hope in the podcast is that it piques enough interest for you to kind of pause and say, I don't think I've been honoring God with my calendar. I don't think I've been honoring God in the commandments to honor the Sabbath. I think that my provision comes from me. I think that my identity comes from me. I think that my work has been a demigod in my life and I need to repent from that. And there's a couple books I'm going to list in the show notes if you want to read more. But I think The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, Subversive Sabbath by Dr. A.J. Swabda, and one other book that I'm going to include in the show notes will be beneficial as you dive into this. But let me remind you, what is Sabbath? You love God and you love your life and you honor him by not working. He is your provider. You are enough. He has chosen you as his child. And your identity does not come from what you produce or what you manufacture. Your identity comes from him. And so I am signing off for the next month. And I am excited, but I'm also confessing that this is hard. And so in this season of my life, I am inviting people into the hard and openly confessing that I am tempted to work. I want to work on my book. I want to work. I love writing and I haven't been able to write. And that's because work has been all consuming and I love it. Leading the church is beautiful. I know what I feel called to do. I know what I want to do. And I need to put that aside to focus on who God has fashioned me to be. I need a chance to catch my rest and to remind myself that I am not my work. I am not my job. I'm not even my calling. I'm enough because he is enough. And I'm inviting you to enter into that space of enoughness as you journey along to get to know Jesus. I love you. Thank you for being part of this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And thank you for giving me grace. Sans makeup in my living room with Richie sitting here on the floor next to me. We both tell you we love you and we can't wait to catch you next month.